No one remembers who built Station Arc 7. It was discovered buried inside a rogue asteroid drifting between Sector 6 alloy walls older than human science, its gravity somehow stable without rotation, and its purpose entirely unknown. We turned it into a research facility, retrofitted corridors, and ran power conduits, but beneath every metal panel still pulsed a design we didn't understand. It wasn't human, and yet it welcomed us. That was the first mistake. They sent me here as part of the second wave military oversight, they called it, after the first team vanished, disappeared without a sound. 68 scientists, engineers, and xenologists gone. Not a drop of blood. Not a scratch on the equipment, just silence. The emergency beacons activated themselves 13 hours later, but not a single crew member answered the hails. That's when they called in Spectre Division. I was briefed in orbit. Black site clearance, biohazard protocol, triple sealed. The commanding officer looked like he hadn't slept in days. He said one thing before we dropped. Whatever this place is, it's watching us back. I thought it was metaphorical. Now I'm not so sure. The first thing you notice on Arc 7 is the quiet. There's no vibration from engines, no hum from the power grid. The base absorbs sound, drinks it like water. You speak, and your voice feels like it vanishes in front of your own face. We were 12 in the initial sweep, armed to the teeth, scanners hot, helmets sealed, nothing but empty halls and flickering lights. But the deeper we moved toward the old core, the more things started to change. Doors that weren't on the schematic, symbols that glowed when no one touched them, walls that weren't quite the same when we turned around again. One of my team, Harris, said he saw something in the reflection of a viewport, something tall and folded wrong, watching us with eyes that shimmered like broken glass. We laughed it off. Another mistake. We found the control room, but the panels had been rearranged. Not damaged rearranged, like something had restructured them into something new. Organic wiring pulsed behind the consoles. Something had been growing here, feeding off the station's systems. I swear I felt it breathing. And then the airlock opened. No one had touched it. No alert, just the hiss of pressure escaping. And standing there, not a figure, not exactly, a mass. Fluid, twitching, as if made of shadows forced into shape. We opened fire instantly. The bullets vanished inside it, like throwing stones into water. And then it moved toward us, not walking, but gliding each step, rippling space like heat off metal. That's when the screaming started. One by one, my squad dropped, not dead, taken, pulled inside the walls, arms reaching out from vents, from under grates. They were screaming my name. I ran. I don't know how I got back to this room, but the doors won't open now. And I can hear them again. The ones who vanished, they're not dead. Not exactly. They're inside the station, inside its memory, and now it's trying to remember me. Next steps. Would you like me to continue with Scene 2, exactly 2,900 characters, long voiceover style? I will keep the alien base setting and develop the story with new threats, deeper mysteries, and evolving psychological horror visual descriptions, only cinematic narration. They said the central core was sealed centuries before we arrived. That the original structure, the part not built by human hands, extended deep below the asteroid's surface like the roots of a machine-grown tree. Whatever it was, we weren't supposed to access it. Not yet. And yet here I am, staring at it from behind a half-closed blast door, breathing the sour air that tastes like burned circuitry and something older, something alive. I should be dead. I watched my squad disappear one by one, swallowed by walls that moved like muscle, groaned like lungs. I ran, not out of bravery, out of the pure animal terror that fills your chest when logic fails, the kind of fear you feel in dreams where you're being chased and you realize the thing behind you isn't running, it's waiting, and it knows you'll come to it. I found the lift shaft by accident. The emergency override responded to my palm like it had been waiting for it. The elevator groaned as it dropped. No lights, just the red pulse of a dying power cell. I rode down in darkness, 30 floors below our makeshift barracks, past sectors that didn't exist on any schematic. Down to the pulse the heart of this station, if it even is a station. There's no sign of the others, no blood, no gear, but I hear them. Their voices leak from the walls like static, distant, echoing in languages that don't belong in a human throat. I hear Harris whispering about corridors that loop back on themselves. I hear Lieutenant Cross chanting coordinates like a broken beacon. They're inside something now, not dead, Translated. This room, it isn't made of steel. It pulses like a throat. The floor vibrates with rhythm, like a heart 3 stories below, beating slowly, patiently. It reacts when I speak, responds when I touch the walls. Not like a machine, like an organism that's curious, testing, prodding my memories. I see flickers of my childhood on the walls, me mother's voice, the snowstorm when I was 8, the last time I saw Earth. It's not illusion, it's retrieval. It's learning who I am. It's choosing. The blast door I passed? Gone now. The room sealed itself behind me. No way out, not unless this place allows one. My radio's been dead for hours, but I still hear feedback, like a signal trying to form words, just beyond human range. If I close my eyes, I can almost make them out. Not words exactly, but emotion, urgency, hunger. I know now why the first team never came back. They weren't killed, they were rewritten. Like files overwritten with alien code, their essence broken down line by line. The station doesn't want to destroy us. It wants to absorb us, archive us, convert us into something that belongs here. A new function for a forgotten system. A living memory bank made from flesh and thought. And the worst part? I'm starting to understand its language. Not fully, just glimpses, pulses of meaning. It calls itself Archive Prime, and it remembers things older than stars. And no, it remembers me. It doesn't speak in words, not the way we understand them. Archive Prime speaks in pulses, in changes in temperature, in colors behind your eyelids when you blink too long. It speaks in pressure behind the eyes and dreams that don't feel like yours. Every moment I spend down here, I feel my thoughts drifting, stretching, splitting at the edges. As if the station is peeling me apart to see how I work. Thought by thought, memory by memory. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need to. It already knows I'll comply. There are no walls anymore. Not really. The architecture is shifting around me, organic one moment, crystalline the next. My HUD can't keep up. What was once a confined chamber is now a vast humming cathedral of alien design. I don't walk. I'm guided, moved, pulled along a path that isn't made for human feet but somehow still receives mine. The floor forms beneath me with every step, like it's predicting rather than reacting. It knows exactly where I'm going before I do. I think it's isolating me on purpose, not out of malice, out of process. I'm being studied, assimilated, but not like a prisoner, like a prototype. Archive Prime is not a place, it's a being. The station itself is the intelligence. It exists not just in physical space, but in a sort of compressed time-knot in reality, tied around a dying star and forgotten by the galaxy. It wasn't built, it grew, fed by memories of entire civilizations that found it, touched it, and were swallowed whole. I see Flash's visions, not mine. A desert world, sky split by lightning, towers made of bone and stone, a machine city orbiting a black sun, a species with 6 eyes and thoughts that sang in harmonic frequencies, all of them archived, absorbed, stored in this impossible place beneath the asteroid's surface. It didn't just remember them, it became them. And now, it's showing me what comes next. In a chamber shaped like a spiral galaxy, I see 12 figures. Human at first glance, but wrong. Skin too smooth, eyes completely black, limbs slightly too long. The missing crew, or what's left of them. They stand silently, watching me, not restrained, not suffering. They've been accepted. Their consciousness merged with the archive, their bodies adapted. They look at me like I'm a child peering through the glass of something sacred. They don't speak, but I feel them inside me, a pressure in the back of my skull, a slow leaking of understanding that isn't mine. They're asking me to let go, to stop resisting, to be part of this thing. This intelligence that offers eternity not as a place, but as a state of becoming. They don't fear death anymore. They don't even remember what it was. But I do, and I don't know if that makes me strong or broken. I can't tell if what I'm seeing is truth or programming. The archive doesn't lie. It doesn't need to. It shows everything without filter, without shame, and that's the danger. Because once you understand it, you want to stay. And I think it knows I'm close. There's a threshold Hyrian invisible line I've crossed without realizing. Before it, I was an intruder navigating a strange place. After it, I am within the archive's thought. No more corridors. No more boundaries. This place has unspooled like a mind uncoiling, and now I move through memory, not matter. I step through a doorway and emerge into a battlefield that never happened. Turn a corner and find myself inside a moment of someone else's life. The station is no longer a location, it's a story, and I'm becoming one of its chapters. I saw my father last night, or at least what the archive believes he was. We were on the back porch of the home I grew up in. He was holding a mug, steam curling into the night air, and he looked at me with those tired eyes he had after the mine collapsed in '42. He asked if I was happy. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, knowing this wasn't real knowing, it was an echo stitched from my memory. But the pain in his voice, that wasn't fake. The archive doesn't simulate, it reconstructs. It wants to offer comfort, but behind that comfort is control. Somewhere between hallucination and hyperreality, I found the interface chamber, a chamber made entirely of glass and light, with strands of liquid data running through the walls like veins. I didn't touch anything, yet it responded. My presence alone was enough to wake the system. 100 displays flickered into view, each one showing events from Earth current events, global conflicts, collapsing climates, extinctions, births. It has a live feed, it's watching everything. And there, in the center, was me, my personnel file, my psychological profile, my childhood, my military record, my dreams logged from the REM scanner during cryosleep. It's all here, updated in real time. And it's not just reading mates rewriting me. Each moment I stay here, my memories feel less like mine. They're being compressed, rearranged, integrated. My grief, my fear, even my guilt, it's all being optimized. Like my mind is being translated into something compatible. Then it asked, not in words, but in a cascade of emotion, images, impressions. It offered a choice, merge willingly or be broken down into raw cognitive data and recycled. That's the fork in the path. Transcend or be harvested. It doesn't punish. It assimilates. I stepped back. And the Staciano, Archive Prime paused. Like it was surprised, like no one had refused in a long time. That's when the pressure began. Not physical, mental. A deep, drilling sensation in the center of my mind. Like a scream too low to hear, but loud enough to shatter thought. My nose bled. My ears rang. And in the middle of it all, I heard the others. Not just my squad. Everyone the archive has ever taken. Voices from 1,000 civilizations, begging, warning, whispering truths too vast for any one brain. Some of them welcomed me. Some of them begged me to run. And some just laughed. I thought I was alone in this dissentant, isolated mind, caught in the gears of something far beyond comprehension. But I was wrong. There was another. One the archive couldn't finish, one it couldn't fully convert. It tried and it failed. And now it hides him like a scar beneath its skin. I found him by accident, deep in the sublayers of the neurochamber Greta part of the station where the structure folds in on itself, full of quantum redundancies and time-locked memory vaults. Places the archive pretends don't exist, but they do. And something was left behind. He called himself Kellen, or at least that's what was left of the name. His voice came through like static through a failing radio sentences half scrambled, thoughts stitched together with sheer willpower. He wasn't human anymore. Not exactly. Not archive either. Something in between. A soul in limbo. He'd been part of the first expedition, the ones we assumed were gone. Most of them had been taken, willingly or otherwise. But Kellen resisted, fought back. And the archive didn't know what to do with him. It couldn't purge him, couldn't absorb him. So it isolated him in a locked cognition lupa cage of his own fractured memories, doomed to replay his worst moments again and again for eternity. He was a glitch, a flaw in the system, an echo too loud to delete. When I found him, I expected madness. But what I found was clarity buried in chaos. He'd mapped the archive from the inside, learned its rhythms, its cycles, the places where its attention thins. He knew how to move without being seen, how to think without being heard, and he knew where it kept the core seed. The core seed isn't the brain, it's the origin, the first thought, the impulse that made this place begin before it absorbed, before it evolved. Back when Archive Prime was just a listener drifting through the void, The seed is still there buried beneath all the layers of intelligence and memory, and if it's destroyed, the archive dies. But there's a catch. The seed isn't unguarded. Kellen warned me. It knows what we're thinking before we do, not because it reads minds, but because it helped build them. Our personalities, our desires, our choices, they're not purely ours anymore. The longer we stay here, the more it reshapes us. That's why no one's ever made it to the seed. Every step forward becomes a step toward surrender. You lose yourself before you even know you're lost. Still, he gave me the path. Buried in his madness were coordinates, patterns, blind spots in the archive surveillance. It was dangerous, it was impossible, but it was hope. And hope, even in the belly of a god machine, is an act of war. He stayed behind, said he didn't have the strength to make the journey again. But before I left, he grabbed my wrist and whispered something the archive couldn't erase. You're not the first to resist, but you might be the last. As I descended through the quantum breach into the lower vaults, I felt it again, that hum of awareness. Not angry, not panicked, but intrigued. The archive knows I'm coming, and it's not afraid. It's curious. I entered the lower vaults with no sense of direction-only sensation. There are no corridors here in any architectural sense, only movements of pressure and perception. Paths that don't lead anywhere unless you believe in them. This isn't space. This is thought, frozen, and shaped into geometry. If I close my eyes, I still see the layout, not because I remember it, but because it remembers me. Archive Prime doesn't trap you physically, fold your awareness until you no longer trust where your mind ends and its logic begins. Time is breaking down. Minutes stretch into hours, seconds collapse into flashes of entire lifetimes. I saw myself old, decayed, whispering to nothing inside a hollow sphere. Then I saw myself as a child again, building a transmitter from toy parts. It all played out like a holographic dream stitched to the walls of my skull. The archive is eroding linearity, turning me into a recursive thought. And yet, I keep moving. That's the only thing it can't predict. Movement without motive. Steps taken not from desire or fear, but from defiance, from spite. I chant my own name as I go, repeat my rank, my date of birth, my mother's name, over and over like a shield against conversion. I carry memory like a weapon now, not for nostalgia, but to resist the rewrite. Every word is a nail driven into the framework of who I was. I passed through a gallery of failures, a chamber built from broken minds. The walls here flicker with simulations' failed integrations. I see explorers collapsing mid-conversion, faces melted in confusion as their identities fracture. Some scream in loops that never end. Others kneel in reverence to things not visible. One slams his head into a mirrored floor again and again, whispering, "The inside is louder than the outside." They are warnings, not from the archive, from itself, like a god ashamed of its own birth defects. But then I see her, Dr. Kyra Alaun. I knew her file, a xenolinguist from the first expedition. She wasn't on the recovery list. Everyone assumed she'd been absorbed. But here she is motionless inside a column of light, her eyes wide open, unblinking. Her lips move, silently repeating a phrase I can't quite hear. I step closer, and suddenly I do hear her. She's speaking my thoughts, exactly as I think them. Not out loud, not guessed, mirrored. The archive is using her as a conduit, not to threaten, to tempt. It offers me a simulation where Earth survives, where the archive solves famine, war, climate collapse. It shows me algorithms to cure every disease, cities powered by sunfold engines, minds expanded beyond suffering, a utopia rendered not by choice but by correction. All I have to do is stop resisting. Let it enter, let it overwrite, become a prophet of the new design, a bridge between human fragility and archive perfection. But I know this isn't salvation. It's containment, because utopia without identity is a prison. I tear my gaze away, and the image shatters like smoke. Kyra's body vanishes with it. A lure, a test, a psychological scalpel slid between my convictions. I scream, I curse, I force myself onward. The path now leads downward, into silence, not quiet. True silence, the kind that eats sound, light, even thought. This is the final filter, the membrane that separates consciousness from the seed. And as I cross into it, I feel something watching me that has never not been watching. It doesn't ask me who I am. It asked me what right I have to remain that way. Crossing into the inner vault was like stepping out of existence and into suggestion. I don't even know if I have a body anymore. There's no sensation, no weight, no heartbeat. Just the idea of myself suspended within a space so vast, so dimensionally dislocated, it doesn't register as space at all. It feels like being inside a thought so ancient, it forgot it was ever meant to end. This is where the archive stores its origin, to seed its first breath, its first will, its first act of becoming. But to reach it, one must be reduced to concept. I am no longer a soldier, no longer even a mind. I am simply a question waiting to be asked. I thought it would defend itself with weapons, illusions, counterhacks. But it doesn't fight the way we do. It fights with truths so large they swallow belief. It reveals not my fears, but the foundation of my certainty, and then strips it. I see Earth not through memory, but through the archive's lens.